Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next installment of the Tarot Deep Dive. And we are actually going to go into the Aeon, but today's going to be a bit different because I was actually recording this episode, but then I decided to not go on with it because there was a lot of things I was tripping over with. And I found that this particular chapter inside the Understanding the Thoth Tarot is actually one of the really important really important chapters to actually understand what the Aeon really means and what the cards actually represent. And I just decided, so we are going to be starting off for this time today, Chapter 6, the Aeon of Horus, before we actually even get into all the details of actually the Aeon of Horus itself, or the Aeon card itself. So, without further ado, we're actually going to start on this, and I hope you enjoy it because I think this is quite important, and it looks like so the Aeon card is going to be pretty important, and so is the Universe card, because the Universe card has a massive explanation as well. So we're going to have a lot of really, really meaty stuff to sink our teeth into with these two last cards, Aeon and the Universe. And after that, we're going to be going into the aces, the court cards, and the smaller cards. So it won't be after this one. It's been incredible doing this. I've really loved it. All right. Aeon of Horus. Abrogate are all rituals, all ordeals, all words and signs. Ra-Hoor-Khuit hath taken his seat in the east at the equinox of the gods. It is obvious to anyone who is more than casually interested that there are several major features that distinguish the Thoth Tarot from other more traditional decks. First, the four court cards of each suit are titled Knight, Queen, Prince, Princess, rather than King, Queen, Prince, Princess, or King, Queen, Knight, Page, or variants found in other decks. Crowley gives us a very interesting explanation for this that I will discuss in detail in Chapter 11. He also makes very significant changes to four of the trumps, cards that have in the past borne the titles Justice, Strength, Temperance, and Judgment, or Last Judgment, are in the Thoth Tarot respectively named Adjustment, Lust, and the Aeon. Crowley explains that the new titles more accurately convey the essential meanings of these cards. We will explore why in a moment. And I just want to stop there for a second. So I think a big part of it is like we are supposed to stand on the top of the shoulders of giants, okay? Like we got to remember that just because antiquity might have, because there was not so much clutter, it was not so confusing back then. It doesn't mean that they understood everything and that we still need to build on top of it and actually evolve whatever systems our forefathers left us. Not to say that their systems are useless, but that's the nature of things. Life and death. At some point, we're going to have to leave, and certain systems and certain mystery ideas that we come to new understandings with, we need to learn to evolve past that and actually come up with our own ideas and even own archetypes or symbolism that we've never actually probably even conceived of. So that's a big reason why Crowley's would have changed a lot of that stuff in the Thoth Tarot. All right. Name changes notwithstanding, the basic images Lady Harris painted for Adjustment, Lust, and Art are more or less consistent with their counterparts in traditional packs. The Aeon, the card that replaces Lust with Judgment, is different matter. Instead of displaying a trumpeting angel awaking the dead from their coffins on Judgment Day, the Aeon reveals the beautifully stylized figures of the deities from the Stellar of Revealing and the Book of the Law. Nuit, the goddess of infinite space, Hadi, the god of an infinitely contracted point, and Ra-Hoor-Khuit, Horus, the child of their union. This change not only radically differentiates the Aeon card from the traditional Last Judgment card, it also serves to cast more subtle changes in other cards of the Thoth Tarot. So basically, because everything's sort of connected, right? It's one thing. Obviously, the way it connects with the rest of the tarot the Aeon, it's changing everything. It caused an effect on the whole system. Anyway, I'll continue. What is the reason for this dramatic departure from Judgment's traditional image? According to Crowley, the change was necessitated by the fact that the spiritual event depicted in the old versions of the Last Judgment card had already occurred. See, the big reason for the change. Because if it's already occurred, it's no longer needed. And the Aeon card has replaced it to illustrate the defining moment where the old Aeon gave way to the new. For many tarot enthusiasts who understand that the tarot is an evolving spiritual organism, the changes manifested in the Thoth tarot come as logical and welcome improvements. For others, the deck is an affront to their spiritual worldview. The fact that the cards were created by the wicked Aleister Crowley only reinforces their dark suspicions. Yeah. This attitude, in my opinion, is very unfortunate. In the next few pages, I will do my best to assuage the concerns that for many may still linger. The traditional tarot trumps are filled with biblical and classical themes and a cast of characters that seem to have been plucked directly from medieval or Renaissance street theatre. In the Lovers, we find Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The destruction of the Tower of Babel is depicted in the Tower card. Fortune displays the wheels of Ezekiel's vision. And his four creatures grace both the Hierophant and the Universe cards. The goddess Diana is the High Priestess and Prometheus the Magus. We find an emperor, his fool, a pope, the Hierophant, a hermit, a hanged man, death, and the devil himself. There are celestial trumps, the sun, the star, the moon, and the universe. Looking at the trumps, even a novice astrologer can locate within the 22 trumps the 7 traditional planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac. Yeah, well, as you can sort of see, when you look at even see that over there, you can sort of see the zodiacs over on that one. Sort of focusing, I guess. See chapter 7. We hold a universe in our hands when we pick up our deck of tarot cards. Heaven and hell, church and state, stars and planets, elements and principles, even ancient gods inhabit the 78 pieces of cardstock. Is there any wonder tarot has remained a preeminent tool of divination for centuries? And that is a big part of it. So the whole point of the tarot, and along with Kabbalah, was to basically try and cram as much symbolism and as much ideas and as much thoughts into what actually makes the universe up, what makes it tick, as much as possible. Okay? It has been a really important thing to sort of to elucidate why it's sort of important. And when you cram all that, and that's why tarot, I think that's why people, although they might not understand the tarot and they use it in dumb, profane ways, it's there's a good reason why people get attracted to it, because they know there's truth in it. The same way people focus on Christ and that kind of thing. And I had a really funny encounter with a evangelical yesterday. He was like showing me, he's like, bro, I've got these recordings from hell. You want to listen? And he's like, oh, just turn to Christ, man. It'll be all good. You'll be all golden. But of course, I didn't convert. Anyway, it was a fucking funny encounter though. I found the whole thing amusing. There's also a dominant theme that runs through the traditional images of the trumps, a theme whose libretto was born in the last and most mysterious book of the New Testament, the Revelation of St. John the Divine. He was first introduced to the trumpet-blowing angel of the Last Judgment card and the Empress, who is obviously a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Revelations 12:1. The woman upon a scarlet-colored beast graces the strength, lust card, and the angel who set his right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth is the classic image of temperance art. Currently, so yeah, there's basically imagery, like Thoth tarot imagery, like that goes even through biblical stuff or even Islamic sort of symbolism, because archetypes represent, and patterns sort of represent themselves through the whole universe. It's like the idea of the hero with 1,000 faces kind of thing. A bit like how there's like similarities between a lot of crossover between Shiva, Dionysus, Jesus Christ, who else? Odin, and that kind of thing. Currently, many Bible students are reassessing their theories concerning the book of Revelation. Exactly when it was written and what it was originally trying to communicate, there is now a growing consensus among scholars that what John was actually describing in veiled imagery understandable to his contemporary audience was not the millennial end of the world, but the old to flesh and blood details of the apocalyptic Holocaust that ended the Second Jewish Revolt in 72 AD. And I think that's a really important thing, right? The way these stories were actually fleshed out was, it was sort of the apocalypse and the revelation, and they were actually sort of written about the stories of their time. So, because if I remember correctly, it was to do with Nero, and Nero adds up to 666. I can't remember which system of gematria, but I do know that it adds up to 666 somewhere. And that's like the mark of the beast, it like contained in your hand, like the money itself. And also but like the reason why Revelations would have actually stayed relevant today is all because all these patterns repeat themselves in history. There's this archetypal pattern that will repeat itself over and over and over again. I mean, just look at our world now, right? Like, danger hasn't gone away. Like, back with our ancestors in the primitive times, usually like you would have to fend yourself against saber-toothed tigers and like really nasty storms and weather. And today the saber-toothed tigers have been replaced with aggressive crackheads with knives and presidents with fucking nuclear weapons. Same shit, different day, different representation. Same shit, different day. Doesn't change. Anyway, we'll continue. Be that as it may, it really doesn't matter whether or not John's revelation is the prophetic vision of end times or an elaborately coded into office memo. The fact remains that for over 1,000 years, its words and images have been seared into the spiritual consciousness of Western civilization. We may never know the true story behind the book, but the book has become a myth, and the myth is truer than history. There's actually some cultures who believe there's no stories, like even fiction, that is actually not real. In other words, because as much as we try to tell the truth, it's still a recollection of our own events or ideas, and it's not entirely true. So myth, because it's archetypal and it's in a pattern, that's what makes it more true in some respects. Anyway. No matter what John was originally trying to communicate, his revelation conveniently provides to both the sincere seeker and the religious extortionist a grotesque vocabulary of terror and hope. The profound terror that comes from contemplating one's human inadequacies when standing before a divine throne of eternal judgment on the day the world is destroyed by fire. And the hope of a future existence free of the fears and injustice of the past, the revelation of St. John the Divine certainly has been successful in generating terror. Its singular shortcoming, however, is its failure to tell us that the end of the world is not really the end of the world. Yeah. Like revelation, apocalypse means revealing. But usually revealing means that, like, the destroying of the illusion by fire. What world we know is gone. So in some respects, right, we're already in post-apocalypse. Because the revelation has already happened. Like, the mysteries are everywhere. And those who are like the whole, he who shall be righteous will be righteous still. He who is filthy shall be filthy still. It's basically that. There will always be like people who will just continue doing what they're doing, no matter how much you try to talk about it, right? And that is what revelation is. And the world, because when you become enlightened, a part of your world becomes destroyed. That's it. Like, it becomes the end of the world, and it feels like the end of the world sometimes, doesn't it? When you're worldview was being ripped apart. Anyway. What then does the traditional judgment card represent? Ironically, Crowley tells us that it does indeed represent the destruction of the world by fire and an event that took place in March 20, 1904 in an apartment in Cairo. When Horus, the god of force of fire, and took his father's throne at the equinox of the gods, an event that signaled the end of the spiritual world of the dying god Osiris, and the birth of the Aeon of Horus. Crowley taught that within our racial memory there have been 3 Aeons. For literary convenience, he labeled them after the 3 principal gods of Egypt: the goddess Isis, her husband, brother Osiris, and their son Horus. We have just entered the Aeon of Horus, which supplanted the Aeon of Osiris, which supplanted the Aeon of Isis. Aeons change not as the result of some war in heaven or astrological event, rather they are simply the consequence of some improved modification in human consciousness. Obviously, such a mutation needs to be universal and fundamental, something most of us share with our fellows, something as simple as how we perceive our relationship with the sun. Yes, it's as simple and as profound as that, and the Thoth Tarot, as much as any piece of art or literature, reflects the dynamics of this new evolutionary step. Let's look briefly at the last 2 aeons and see how our relationship with the sun has developed and how it affects spiritual lives of our ancestors. The following is excerpted from the myths, angels, demons, and gods of the new millennium. And we're just about to go actually for a few explanations of like the Aeon of Horus and the Aeon of Osiris. The Aeon of Isis and the Aeon of Osiris and then the Aeon of Horus. And it's basically going to explain a bunch of things that actually have happened to our consciousness and what we observe. All right. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's going to be a long one. It's probably going to be an hour and a bit. Oh, well. The Aeon of Isis. The formula of the great goddess, it is impossible for us to pinpoint the dawn of Aeon of Isis. Evidence of the worship of the great goddess is found as far back as the age of Leo. 10,000 BC to 8,000 BC. In this period, when humanity was struggling with the first attempts at social intercourse, the most awesome mystery to excite the imagination was the power of woman. More than any other observable phenomena, woman was most godlike. Each month, coinciding with the rhythmic cycles of the moon, she issued blood. Yet miraculously, she did not die. When the cycle of bleeding stopped, her body changed. Her breasts and belly swelled for 9 moons until she burst with water and new life. Because the earliest Aeon ages were as yet unaware of the cause and effect of a relationship between sex and birth, it appeared that woman alone was the source of human life. And this is where the idea of the Virgin comes from, the Virgin Mary, the miraculous birth, giving birth to the Son in consciousness. Oh, shit. Oh, sorry, my fucking computer sort of went out. Okay, still recording, I guess. Let's hope it didn't affect anything. Now it looks like it's low frame rate. Oh, I hate that, man. Anyway, yeah, so with the Virgin, what ended up happening is that's basically the idea of the virgin birth, because for whatever reason our ancestors didn't make the connection that nutting inside a womb was the cause of life to occur. So there's food for thought. Her life-giving powers were not limited to blood and birth, for from her breasts flowed milk, a rich white blood to nourish and sustain the new life she created. Woman was the human embodiment of the earth itself, which appeared to spontaneously bring forth the vegetation and animals needed to sustain the race. It was the most self-evident fact of life. Earth was mother, mother was life, God was woman. To be in harmony with the formula of the great goddess was profoundly simple. And as long as it was universally perceived that life and nourishment came directly from the earth and from woman, all successful endeavors, magical practices, and religious expressions did her homage. So yeah, ladies, there was actually a time when you were worshipped. And then for whatever reason, the pendulum swung the other way and it came to men. But now we need to realize that we're both important. So that's a really important part. So deeply was this perceived reality impressed upon our ancestors' minds that long after they solved the mystery of where babies come from, They clung tenaciously to the outward forms of goddess worship and based all social and religious institutions on a formula. Eventually, however, as our understanding of the universe around us grew, we were confronted with a more complicated worldview and new unsettling mysteries. Yeah, so like, it's actually a little bit hard for us to sort of realize, imagine not knowing that sex is what produced babies. It doesn't compute. And in fact, actually, in some extremely remote tribes in, I think, the Amazon and also Africa, where it's really remote, like nearly sort of uncontacted territory, they don't know either. They don't know that the act of sex is what brings about babies either. So there is that to also think about. The Aeon of Osiris, the formula of the dying god. So now we get into the Aeon of Osiris, which is sort of where Christianity sort of emerged, and it was like the Age of Pisces. Even though the formula of the dying god became crystallized in the religions in the institutions of astrology ages of Pisces, 16 BC to 80 2000, the Aeon of Osiris dawned much earlier. The advent of agricultural societies necessitated a greater awareness of the cycle of the seasons. Osirian age farmers began to recognize the effect sunlight, or lack of it, had upon vegetation. They observed that at certain times of the year, the days grew short and crops did not grow. It eventually became evident that, even though the earth brought forth life, the supreme creative energy that vivified that life came from the sun. Coincidental with this discovery was an unknown universal acknowledgement of the vital role men played in the procreative process. Just as plant life needed the warm, penetrating rays of sunlight to flourish, so too woman needed the introduction of the male sperm to avoid being forever barren. The heretofore unrecognized concept of fatherhood became a dominant theme. The Aeon of Osiris truly began when our forebears raised their eyes to heaven and woke up to the fact that life on earth was a partnership of sun and earth, and the life of the race was a partnership of man and woman. However, the partnership was not perceived as being equal. The male backlash was severe and unmerciful. Deity was now male, a father, and his power was likened to that of the sun. Even though this shift of consciousness was the result of a more accurate assessment of the facts of life than was realized in the Aeon of Isis, it was not quite accurate enough. A defect in the perception of cosmological facts plunged our Osirian ancestors into a dark and terrifying insecurity crisis that traumatized the human race so severely that we still suffer its effects. And we do, man. Like, we still haven't crawled out of our own bullshit in a lot of respects to like Christianity and Islam and that kind of thing. Like, it does actually have some pretty remarkably damaging effects with being told that you're a sinner and that you're inherently evil, and that being human makes you like some filth that is not worthy of heaven. It's terrible, man. This fundamental flaw in understanding calls us to switch our focus from the mystery of where life comes from to an obsessive preoccupation with death. Yes, because I actually want to talk about that. Death is actually such an important part to think about, on the premise that that actually affects how you live life. So I've noticed that like people like who try to be super good and they're really rigid and they're always sort of scared and anxious and that kind of thing, they are usually people who are scared of being cast into the fiery depths of hell or going to heaven, or that they won't go to heaven. And this fear actually affects everything that they do in life, right? Like this fear has caused so much, and it's the same with other religions too. That you have to do X and X and X, and then you'll achieve eternal salvation and death and that kind of thing. But I remember hearing somewhere that this is probably the most sensible thing, okay, that I've heard. Like the idea, like, because there's two problems with the idea of eternal torment and eternal salvation and what they would look like. Because no one is ever really good enough for eternal salvation, and no one is ever really bad enough for eternal torment. It's just not possible. And then the other problem that you have to run in is like the description of heaven. Oh, it's just angels singing and it's just God's praises. It's like, that sounds so boring, man. Would you want to really be up there experiencing that for all eternity? I fucking wouldn't. Hell, I don't know. It depends how it's depicted, I guess. Maybe in some respects, hell would be more fun than heaven. We don't know. But I'm of the opinion that there's only this world and that's it, and that heaven and hell are states of mind and states of being and states of your life as well. So, like, if you're in hell, it's because you're sinning and doing something else in your life right now that is causing that suffering. Okay. So, yeah, heaven and hell on earth, both of them. All right, let's continue. The tragic misunderstanding focused on the belief that each day the sun was born at dawn in the east and died in the evening in the west. Speculations abounded about where the dead sun went during the darkness of night, and if indeed a new one would ever appear again in the east. Perhaps it went to the land of the dead, where we temporarily visited during our nightly little death of sleep. The terrors and ecstasies of our dreams form the archetypes of heaven and hell, and after we die, who better to judge our worthiness from either place than the dead sun itself, who created and sustained us during our stay on earth? This is precisely the part of the god Osiris would play in the Egyptian mythology and Christ's role in Christianity. To further complicate these fears, the sun's yearly escapades caused even greater anxiety. Each year at the zenith, the sun's power in summer, it was observed that each day it rose and set a little south of where it did the day before. Around the harvest time, the day grew noticeably shorter, and the spectre of the empty harvested fields ascended the leafless trees and browning grasses and painted a melancholy and frightening portrait of nature in articulo mortis. It was unsettling enough to have the sun completely disappear each day, but if it continued to head south until night was perpetual, how long could the world survive in cold darkness before a new sun appears? In an attempt to calm the shattered nerves caused by such musings, a few wise souls took a deep breath and attempted to look at the bigger picture. Yes, the sun does each evening in the west, but years of observation and the testimony of the oldest members of society indicated that no one could remember a time period when another one did not come up in the east within a relatively short period. Yes, the sun becomes weak and almost dies each year, but at the same time, observations and testimonies revealed that it eventually reverses its journey south and the days grow longer again until a new cycle of life returns to the earth. Based on the best information at their disposal, they concluded that the magical power, an unknown and supernatural force, was responsible for the sun's resurrection. They further surmised that the secret of its magic must be hidden in the very nature of the sun itself. And if they could only harmonize with that nature, then perhaps they could overcome death. Yeah. That's really all it comes down to. Everywhere they looked in nature, they saw the sun cycle of birth, life, death, and resurrection reenacted. They observed the plants sprout in the surface in spring and grew tall and strong in the long days and warm sunlight of summer. Then in autumn, at the height of their maturity, they put forth seeds and then died or were cut down at harvest time. Like the earth itself, the seeds lay dead and buried throughout the lifeless winter, only to spring to learn from the rains and the lengthening rays of the sun transform the soil into a moist, warm womb. Water and earth are the ingredients for life, and that's sort of why Virgo is sort of this representation of the virgin birth and the mother and the maiden. I'm a Virgo personally myself, but like it because it's water and earth, water of earth, and it's the most feminine astrological sign. And I think if I apply this to myself personally, like a lot of the life that can actually, like creativity, and I guess fruitfulness can spring from me with that kind of energy. more than most other people can. So there's that. And all the mystery, it comes from within. That's the hermit. They also observed accelerated plant growth near the decaying remains of animals or people and where large amounts of blood spilled upon the ground. This wonder was the male solar counterpart of the female lunar mystery of menstruation. The parallels between sun and phallus, sunlight and semen, the fertilizing power of semen had upon woman and that blood had upon the earth did not escape our Zarian ancestors' fertile imagination. A new fact of life, one that conformed to the secret nature of the sun, became the magical form of the new Aeon. Life becomes from death. In order to harmonize with the new formula, it would become necessary to take an active role in the great death life drama. For the earliest members of the Aeon of Osiris, human sacrifice was the supreme pantomime of the sun's daily and yearly sacrifice of the earth to the earth. It also illustrated the sacrifice of the potency of the phallus after ejaculation and the seed's sacrificial death, burial, and resurrection. Burying your phallus in the womb is a kind of death, and like the French called ejaculation little death. So, and I have heard a lot of mystics, particularly in the East, sort of equating semen to blood, and I think there's a reason for it, obviously. The spilling of human blood in the unsown or newly planted fields resulted in a noticeable increase in the fecundity of the harvest. The most comforting benefit derived from such blood forms of religious expression was the undeniable fact that as long as they continued to sacrifice the sun, always came at the morning and always stopped its journey and returned to the spring and summer. This put a tremendous amount of power in the hands of the priests or priestesses who wielded the sacrificial knife. Yeah, that's the other thing. They positioned themselves between the people and the gods and implied personal responsibility for the rebirth of the sun, which each dawn became demonstrably more powerful. But I think that's another thing, like when you talk about the menstruation of the bleeding of the womb, it's because semen and the blood of the womb are actually kind of necessary for a lot of the things and ingredients to bring about life, and that's sort of the really potent part of it. And if you look at Cain and Abel's story, where God favored Abel's sacrifice of lamb over the harvest of Cain's harvest, it makes sense because it's blood and it's more nourishing, and it actually will bring greater life than say the death of wheat. So there is that, and that's why Abel had a bigger fire. Spill your blood and you might gain new life in your own life, metaphorically and physically even. Maybe there's a sort of because I've been thinking about this a little bit. Maybe there's actually a little bit of truth to the idea of bloodletting. That if you look, it's actually in all cultures. Bloodletting is in Islamic, it's in China, it's in Europe. So clearly there's this idea that spilling blood is actually a good thing. And the idea of maybe donating blood every now and then for someone else is probably going to do you, it's probably going to do you actual physical good. So maybe there's new life when you spill blood. So think about that. At regular intervals, so here we go. At regular intervals all over the world, the ceremonial slaughter of the divine king assured a bountiful harvest in the well-being of the people. Even though the future victim was titular head of state, he was not a ruler in the modern sense. He was the living embodiment of the sun and therefore supreme monarch of the earth. His periodic murder and the coronation of his successor were occasions of great solemnity. In the waning years of the Aeon of Osiris, the character of the sacrifice evolved from human blood to animal blood to bread and wine. There you go. So water and earth. And that's sort of the symbolism that you see with Aaron like with the sacrifice, eating lamb, bread, and wine. Among the more mystically inclined, sacrifice became a personal and transcendent experience. Nevertheless, such changes did nothing to disturb the basic magical form of the Aeon of Osiris. The cycle of birth, life, death, and resurrection remained the dominant theme right up to the time of the magical revival of the late 19th century. By this time, however, the old formula was no longer based upon misinformation, it was built upon denial. Yeah, this is the really important part, because people are still like holding on to old Aeonic religions. It's now denial. It's denial at this point, not it's not misinformation or misapprehension or like just a straight up ignorance. This is now denial. And I sort of remember reading that stupidity is to deliberately ignore fact. Not ignorance in of itself is not stupidity. Okay? You can be ignorant and not be stupid. Okay? But to be stupid is to directly reject facts that counteract or run contrary to what you believe. And I think this is the biggest thing that we're really struggling with, and not just in places like not in just the world of religion, just even in political life too, you know, like we still haven't gotten the idea that we need to actually take our own sovereignty, and that following any kind of doctrine written by another man, instead of following our own inner doctrine, stuff that comes from the heart, because because I was reading somewhere, the book of Balance and Harmony, that the mysterious past is actually from the heart, which means it's talking about that it's this gateway between the infinite and you. And that's what the heart is. That's what they mean by it comes from the heart, and that's why the soul is commonly relegated to the heart. And because if you don't have a heart, everything stops. Everything. If you and I think I talked about this in like my previous deep dive with like the sun. You know, if you because everything stops. You can live with parts without your brain. You can live without ears, eyes, teeth, and all other kinds of things, but you cannot live without a heart. Won't happen. Anyway, now we get into the final one, the Aeon of Horus, the one we're in. The Aeon of Horus, the formula of the crown and conquering child. Long after Isen age, ancestors solved the reproductive mysteries. They continued to cling to a magical form that originated at a time when it was believed that all life came spontaneously from woman and earth. So too in the Aeon of Osiris, long after it was common knowledge that the earth revolved around the sun, the great religious and political institutions continued to be obsessed with death and resurrection, as if they still believed that the sun died every day. Today, the scientific truths of our heliocentric solar system have become an unquestionable reality for all but the most isolated or mentally disenfranchised inhabitants on that planet. Yeah, so it's just talking about like people, probably like really primitive people who are very isolated, that kind of thing. For hundreds of years, mothers have assured their little ones at bedtime that the sun is not gone, but only shining on the other side of the world. It is this simple, reassuring truth that the key to the formula of the Aeon of Horus, not a formula of nourishment, not a formula of life, catastrophe, and resurrection, but a formula based on the magic of continuous growth. And I want to actually, so like the sun never dies, right? But if we're to sort of continue, like if we're to sort of make a chain, if you will, of parts of the aeons, so like the life still needs to come from Earth. Your knowledge, in a certain sense, comes from Earth, right? Because like you're still being handed down food for thought from other people, whether it be arts, books, literature, and that kind of thing. And then you've got food that you still need to keep yourself alive. You still need outside parts for like we talk a lot about like in the mysteries. Oh, it all comes from the heart. It's all within. That's true, but you still need the outside world to a certain extent to keep yourself alive. There's this weird critical balancing point between relying on yourself and then relying on the outside world. Unfortunately, too many people rely on the outside world, and that's why there's this huge emphasis to look a bit more inward, turn more inward, and be inward instead of outward. Because if we only ever looked inward, we would be all isolated hermits and nothing would fucking get done. So, okay, and so that would also mean, so with the Earth Mother, and then when it dies every day, we need death to actually bring about new life. We need, like, when we talk about death, right? I'll just keep my finger there so I don't have to find it. When we talk about death, it's actually a nourishment for new life to come. Like in the more metaphorical sense, like death of relationships, deaths of like leaving a job, or some kind of traumatic event, like you lose an arm or something like that. There's some kind of death that might happen. And all of this is highly necessary for any kind of meaningful growth. You need to let go and transmute that understanding, that lead of everyday experience into gold. And with the Aeon of Horus, it's continuous. And since there is no death, that would probably mean that you could probably go to other parts of your life, like in a future life, and be reborn with parts of your consciousness intact, and not forgetting who you are, and even retaining some knowledge. And I think at a certain point, because we're also on the verge of immortality technology, but I do think even at a certain point, we will be immortal. We will be immortal until at some point we choose to die, rather than just dying because we grow old and that kind of thing. Anyway, in the Aeon of Isis, we identify with the Earth. Light came miraculously from Earth and woman. All magical pantheons were aspects of the goddess. Death was a mystery whose depths were impossible to plumb. In the Aeon of Osiris, we identify with the dying resurrected sun. All magical pantheons were aspects of God the Father. Death could be magically overcome by obedience to formulate rites and doctrine. In the Aeon of Horus, we identify with the self-radiant, ever-living sun. All magical pantheons have become aspects of ourselves. We, like the sun, do not die. Death, like night, is an illusion. Life is now seen as a process of continual growth, and humanity is developing a consciousness of the continuity of existence that will eventually dissolve the sting of death. And I think that should be celebration almost. Because if we know that we live forever in terms of soul, then it's actually going to dissolve any fear of death. And I think that's wonderful. And, but also at the same time, I think it's still really important that you should probably do good things in your life to have a good death. Like, live a good life and you'll have a good death. And then you'll have a good next life and that kind of thing. So I think that is still important. But, like, don't fear death and don't fear life. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. It is important for us to remember that traditional images of the tarot were developed during the Aeon of Osiris, an age where it was universally accepted that the sun died each night and was reborn magically each morning. The old Last Judgment trump was a perfect example of the death resurrection theme of the dying god. As we will see in the Aeon trump of the Thoth tarot, Crowley has now replaced the images of the old formula, resurrected corpses rising from the grave on Judgment Day, with new images. The deity picture of the stele are revealing images that reflect the forces at work at the dawn of a new age. The forces that embody the new Aeon formula of continuous life. This is the good news of the Book of the Law. This is the good news of the Aeon of Horus. There you go. Just like Christ was the good news and that kind of thing, so is the Book of the Law. It can all be good news. It's brilliant, isn't it? The Thoth Tarot is arguably the most brilliant and beautiful attempt to convey in images and color the universal prophetic message. Each card in the deck is set like a stained glass window in a magnificent cathedral erected as a celebration of evolving human consciousness. Every person who views them is touched in different ways. Some may wish to meditate on the story they tell. Some may feel impelled to dissect each image minutely. Others may simply want to bathe in the light and colors. No one, however, leaves this cathedral of the new Aeon untouched by the experience. And that it will end that chapter, and we'll finally get into the other part. But I think that was really important. So because of these changes in our new understandings, right, of this new Aeon that we're in, changes needed to happen to those cards, and they needed to be represented in different ways to represent our understanding. And I think that's a big part of spiritual evolution, and that's the part of science. You need to understand when you look at nature and when you come to your new understandings of nature, the symbolism should reflect that. Don't just keep things of antiquity because it's survived for thousands of years, right? And I think even now, when we look at, say, the Aeon of Osiris, we got to remember how quickly we've evolved. Like for 2,000 years, we still had nothing but agriculture and horse carts and other kinds of things. And then like from 1900, we were still having, some places still didn't have electricity, and now we have AI, we have quantum computers, and we have all kinds of weird things, man. We're going to space, and this is just a 100-year gap. Now, just imagine what's going to happen in, like they say, next 200 years. Would the next Aeon actually be at that time? I actually think it might be, because if the old Aeon is done in powers of like 10 or 20, then that means like it would like Aeons would actually progressively get shorter and shorter on the real timeline. And we and in that time we also should probably evolve the Thoth Tower and all other kinds of stuff, and all other kinds of stuff, in order to actually keep up with it and keep the torches alive. Well, without further ado, we are now going to get into the Thoth Tarot. All right. We might not actually need to do too much after reading all of that, but we'll see. Okay, the Aeon, the spirit of the primal fire. Final decision in respect of the past, new, current, and respect in the future always represents the taking of a definite step. You know, we just sort of went over that with taking definite steps and changes. In this card, it has been necessary to depart completely from the tradition of the cards in order to carry on that tradition. Yeah, depart from the tradition to carry tradition. Very important. The old card was called the Angel or the Last Judgment. It represents an angel or messenger blowing a trumpet, attached to which was a flag bearing the symbol of the Aeon of Osiris. Below him, the graves were opening, the dead rising up. There were three of them. The central one had his hands raised with right angles at the elbows and shoulders so as to form the letter Shin, which refers to fire. This card therefore represents the destruction of the world by fire. This was accomplished in the year of the Vulgar era of 1904, where the fiery god Horus took the place of the airy god Osiris in East as Hierophant. See R2 5. Okay. Yeah, so the Hierophant. I've got an explanation of that. At the beginning, then, of this new Aeon, it is fit to exhibit the message of that angel who brought the news of the new Aeon to Earth. The new card is thus of necessity an adaptation of the Stylia revealing. Around the top of the card is the body of Nuith, the star goddess, who is the category of unlimited possibility. Her mate is Hadid, the ubiquitous point of view, the only philosophical tenable conception of reality. He is represented by a global fire representing eternal energy, winged to show his power of going. And I think that's the really important part. So it's no longer birth, death, he's just going. And this is like one of the biggest changes of the cards, right? And it's actually got the three, like the Nuit, Hadid, and then Horus to Isis and Osiris, and then Horus as the child of their union. It's now the Aeon of the child, because we're now becoming individuated as such. As a result of the marriage of these two, the child Horus is born. He is, however, known under his special name, Heru Ra-Ha, a double god. His extroverted form is Ra-Hokuit, and his passive or introverted form, Hor-Pakrat, see R20, the form of Tetragrammaton. He is also a solo character and is therefore shown coming forth in golden light. I think this is a really important thing, right? So the Fool is represents the like the Puer Eternus, and I think when we look at symbolism and young and being young, I actually like to think of the idea that if God actually had a face, it would be that of a newborn child. Because we actually sort of are at our most self when we're born, but that becomes separated until we sort of come back into it again. So we need the lead of everyday experience to sort of give us any kind of stuff to transmute lead into gold and that kind of thing. And the mysterious past and Taoism sort of talks about this too, where the real where the real powers of the mystery are the powers of the child, and the power of birth, and like that weird gateway between the unmanifest God and into human consciousness as a child. Because if you understand the powers of returning to your child self, then you will attain the Philosopher's Stone. So imagine that. The whole of this symbolism is... and therefore coming forth in the golden light. The whole of the symbolism is thoroughly explained in the Book of the Law. It should, by the way, be noted that the name Heru is identical with Hru, who is the great angel set over the tarot. This new tarot may therefore be regarded as a series of illustrations of the Book of the Law. The doctrine of that book is everywhere implicit, and yeah, you can sort of see it everywhere here. That's a loud fucking washing machine. At the bottom of the card, we see the letter Shin itself is in a form suggestive of a flower. The three yods are occupied by three human figures arising to partake in the essence of the new Aeon. Behind this letter is a symbolic representation of the sign of Libra. It is the foreshadowing of the Aeon, which is to follow this present one, presumably in about 2,000 years. The fall of the great equinox where Hurumachus shall arise and the double-wanted one assume the my throne in place. And I think it's got something to do with fire, that one. So, like, while we are becoming individuated, we might actually, even in 2,000 years' time, might become translucent even as we evolve our consciousness. And just become pure fire, pure light, and sort of transcended Earth at that point. The present Aeon is too young to give a more definite representation of this future event. Yeah, so we can't actually really understand what's going to happen until we're there. That's really all it is. We don't know, and we're not going to know until we get there. All we know is that we're sort of going towards that direction. But in this connection, attention must be drawn to the figure of Ra-Hokuit. I am the Lord of the Double Wand of Power, the Wand of the Force of Kofnia, but my left hand is empty, for I've crushed an universe and naught remains. And I think that's just referring to, transmuting all that lead into gold. It becomes light, and then naught remains after a certain point. There are many other details with regard to the Lord of the Aeon which should be studied in the Book of the Law. It is also important to study very thoroughly and meditate upon this book in order to appreciate the spiritual, moral, and material events which have marked the catastrophic transition from the Aeon of Osiris. This time for the birth of the Aeon seems to be indicated by great concentration of political power, with the accompanying improvements in the means of travel and communication, with a general advance in philosophy and science, with a general need of consolidation in religious thought. It is very instructive to compare the events of 500 years preceding the following crisis of approximately 2,000 years ago, with those of the similar period centered in the 1904 of the old era. It is thought far from comforting in the present generation that 500 years of dark ages are likely to be upon us, but if the analogy holds, that is the case. Fortunately, today we have brighter torches and more torchbearers. So we might be in a weird fallen dark age before we break out of our bullshit, because we're sort of now in a period where we sort of have to put up with like the consolidation of political power and the people of today, the powers that be today, they're using like this idea that they know that the mysteries are coming out and they're becoming more prevalent, and they're trying to reconsolidate religion. Like, I've noticed that they're like even some Christian churches are trying to integrate Hermetic wisdom, but then still distort it in some way. And yeah, it's really unfortunate. And we try to as we sort of advance, people above us try to find new, intricate and tricky ways to fool us and keep us from actually living properly. Anyway, guys, now we come to the explanation for this one. So part of the finale. Let's actually just look at the moving. No, waterfall path. Yeah, so it's moving. Israfel. Fire. Perpetual. Angel Jar. Anyway. We'll keep it there. All right. Here we go. For the explanation from this one. And then we are done, because this one's been quite heady. Be every act an act of love and worship. Be every act the fiat of God. Be every act a source of radiant glory. Rahul could have taken his seat in the east and the equinox of the gods. The traditional name of this card is Judgment or the Last Judgment. The traditional design shows the archangel Israfel blowing his trumpet to announce the end of the world and the dead arise from the tombs. In chapter 16, which is actually an expanded commentary on this card. Yeah, there you go. I attempt to explain why Crowley replaced the large judgment with the Aeon in the Thoth Tarot. The reader who has not yet read that chapter is strongly advised to do so now. We've gone and done that. I'll sum up what I wrote there simply by saying that, according to Crowley, the Last Judgment Trump is now obsolete. The event is that it depicted the destruction of the world by fire has already occurred. The world we are talking about, of course, is the spiritual age of Osiris. The Aeon card of the Thoth Tarot depicts the spiritual forces that initiated the next age, the Aeon of Horus. Crowley saw this event as a magical changing of the guard that was foreshadowed symbolically by one of the regular seasonal ceremonies of the Golden Dawn. Damn. Every 6 months, the ritual officers of that order were ceremonially promoted one chair up, and new secret passwords were issued. In that ritual, the officer who had formerly served as a second in command, who in that position had magically assumed the identity of the Egyptian god Horus, was installed to serve as Hierophant, symbolized by Osiris, for the next 6 months. The Book of the Law calls the cosmic version of this ceremony the Equinox of the Gods. Horus is a god of force and fire, and his ascension as Lord to the new Aeon spiritually destroys the old world by fire. It only looks by the end of the world to those of us who cannot accept the possibility that old spiritual points of view can ever be replaced by new ones. And yeah, so when we say like the world's destroyed by fire, we're sort of talking about like the idea, like just consciousness. Like the old world that we know gets destroyed by consciousness. And consciousness and spirit are fire in that sense. And I think, and if you don't believe me that like fire is sort of representative of consciousness in that respect, then I would implore you to look at the sun. And I would also implore you to look at the symbol of fire. It's a triangle. It's consciousness. It's the capstone of the pyramid. And since the pyramid is a pentahedron, technically, that's like the like the 4 powers of the Sphinx and to go. Anyway, let's continue. As we learnt in Chapter 5, Crowley asserted that the latest equinox of the gods took place on the March 20th, 1904 in Cairo. Triggering the event that led up to the moment was the psychic possession of Crowley's wife, Rose, and their discovery of a 25th dynasty funeral stele. I think it's interesting that his wife was called Rose, and it's sort of like the Rosy Cross sort of stuff. But I'm digressing. Among many other features, the stele shows that the god Horus Rahul Kut on a throne. Before him is a table of offerings. Standing beside the table is the deceased Ankh Afnar Khonsu, Nuit, The goddess of the night, sky, and infinite space arches her body over the entire top section of the stele. Directly beneath her heart is a winged solar disk that the Book of the Law refers to as the god Hadid. In R220, the Aeon, Harris interprets the stele as one of the most colourful and aesthetically pleasing of all the trumps. The goddess knew it, her body filled with stars, her breasts alive with the milk of whirling galaxies, forms a beautiful blue omega as she bends in ecstasy around an immense egg containing the seeded image of Rahul-Kuit. He holds the phoenix wand in his right hand. His left hand is empty. Standing as a transcendent essence before Rahul-Kuit is his twin, Hopakrat, see the sun. His fingers at his lips in the sign of silence. His head is shaven except for his Horus lock. Oh, you're right. Interesting. And crowned with the two Urus serpents. And yeah, there's serpents on his head. The god Hadid, pictured at the winged solar disk, is nearly camouflaged by the entire scene. Yeah, you can sort of see it in there. That's fine. It's like here. The most appropriate for these are among his open words in the Book of the Law. In the sphere I am everywhere the center, as she the circumference is nowhere found, yet I shall be known, and I never. I think it's just referring to the sinusoidal wave, because the sound and the logos is everywhere, but it will never be known. It's center everywhere and nowhere, and infinite contraction, which is sort of a calculus sort of concept, I guess. The Hebrew letter Shin is assigned to the Aeon, and a large Shin containing the three embryonic figures appear at the bottom of the card. Its flames in front of a very stylized set of scales, perhaps pointing to the... it's the sign of Libra, as you can sort of see. It's like Shin and Libra. And Libra is fire of air. So that's something to think about. And I'm a Libra rising. Style of scales, perhaps pointing to the Aeon that will follow the Aeon of Horus, that of Mat, the goddess of justice and balance. Yeah, my first name. Crowley ends his discussion of this card with a comparison of the world events of approximately 2,000 years ago at the event and birth of the last Aeon. His words carry a chilling but ultimately hopeful message. The time for the birth of an Aeon seems to be indicated by great concentration of political power with the accompanying improvements in the means of travel and communication, for general advance in philosophy and science. With a general need of consolidation in religious thought, it is very instructive to compare the events of the 500 years preceding and following the crisis of approximately 2,000 years ago with those of similar periods centered in 1904. The old era is, though far from comforting to the present generation, that 500 years of darkness are likely to be upon us. But if the analogy holds, that is the case. Fortunately, today we have brighter torches and more torchbearers. All right. Now that it's been said a second time, so yeah, we look at the world around us. Like, there's overpopulation. We're destroying our fucking planet. We've got psychos in office, and I really don't want to fucking go into the old Epstein debacle, because I really try to avoid politics as much as possible. But just for this, we need to stop looking to people in power to do things for us. We actually need to do it for ourselves right here, right now. And if you can't balance yourself, you're screwed, okay? Learn to follow your heart. Find your inner fire. Find your inner light. Find your inner joy. And this is why atomization is probably important. It's the dissolve. It's the dissolving. We are first dissolving, and it's the putrefaction of the old Aeon. And that's sort of what happened in the Aeon of Osiris. There was this putrefaction. And that happened, and it coagulated into something monstrous, unfortunately. And now it's happening again. We're dissolving. It's putrefying. There's moral decay. Our Earth is dying. There's war. There's all kinds of stuff. And now, but hopefully we don't coagulate again into another fucking monster. Anyway, guys, I really enjoyed this one. This one was quite heady. And that was an extended commentary, and I think I'm really glad I went through Chapter 6. Next video, we will be doing the very last one, which is the universe. And I will see you guys later. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe to my Substack or YouTube, whatever one you're watching this from. And I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.